Why did she always stand than the others? Why, even when sweat poured down her back and the August sun scorched the asphalt, did her boots stay planted, her eyes locked forward, her voice steady as steel? Private First Class Emma couldn't answer those questions herself. She only knew one truth: discipline was the only thing she truly owned. The gate was considered punishment by most, a rotation meant for rookies and troublemakers. Long hours in the glare, endless IDs, the drone of cars and trucks sliding forward one by one. A checkpoint at Norfolk Naval Station wasn't supposed to matter. To her, it was a babysitting job with rifles. But to Emma, the gate mattered. Each ID that passed through her hands wasn't just a card. It was a test. One wrong glance, one distracted second, one forgery waved through, and the consequences could echo far beyond the checkpoint. She carried that weight in silence. And while the Marines beside her laughed about last night's bar crawl or muttered complaints about the boredom, she locked in. She had been taught in basic: focus is survival. It wasn't the loud or the strong who endured. It was the ones who held their ground when chaos pressed hardest. So she stood tall, chin high, back straight, eyes sharp, even when sweat trickled down her neck soaking her undershirt, even when the humidity made her skin feel like a damp rag. She never adjusted her cap, never broke the line of her shoulders. Her father's words echoed in her chest. Respect is built when no one is watching. Do the small things right and the big things will follow. She believed that. She had to, because on this post no one was watching, at least that's what she thought. The morning dragged with its usual rhythm. A pickup rolled forward. A petty officer with salt and pepper hair leaned out the window, handing over his ID. Emma took it firmly, scanned, confirmed, and returned it with a crisp nod. "You're good to go, sir." The man smiled faintly. "Thank you, Private." Routine, repetition, the rhythm of a shift that never seemed to end. She pushed down the doubts that sometimes surfaced, the ones that whispered, maybe they don't see your potential, maybe you'll never be more than the gate girl. She didn't let the thoughts show, not once, not in posture, not in tone. Next vehicle. The hours blurred into one another. She recited her general orders in her mind when fatigue threatened her focus. She shifted her stance only when her inner clock told her she had earned it, rituals that kept her from slipping into complacency. Because complacency was the enemy, she knew that more than most. And then something changed. The flow of cars slowed. Conversation among the Marines nearby cut off mid-laugh. Emma's instincts sharpened instantly, every nerve on edge. A black SUV rolled into view, its windows tinted, sunlight bouncing off polished paint. It wasn't just the vehicle, it was the way the air shifted around it, the way Marines straightened unconsciously, the silence that rippled through the checkpoint. Emma's heart ticked faster, but her body didn't falter. She tracked the SUV as it eased closer, her clipboard firm in her grip. The driver's window slid down with quiet precision. A man in his 40s sat inside, close-cropped hair, a jaw like carved stone. His eyes, icy blue, radiated authority that didn't need to be spoken. His uniform was immaculate, the ribbons across his chest a quiet history of battles fought, scars survived. He extended his ID. Her gaze flicked to the text. "Commander James." Emma's breath hitched just once. She knew the name, everyone did, a decorated SEAL commander. Stories about him circled the base in hushed tones. Missions that sounded impossible, teams rescued, soldiers pulled from the brink. A man who didn't need to speak to be obeyed. And now his card rested in her hands. Her fingers trembled for half a heartbeat. Then discipline took over. She steadied herself, checked the holograms, the expiration date, the photo. Procedure was procedure. Rank meant nothing when you were standing at the gate. She handed it back crisp, unwavering. "Thank you, sir." He didn't move. Emma's lungs tightened. His eyes lingered on her, studying her with a weight that made every second stretch. He didn't look past her like others did. He didn't dismiss her presence. He measured her. She didn't flinch, she couldn't. And then something happened no one expected. The SUV door opened. His boots struck pavement with a thud that silenced every other sound, the hum of idling engines, the buzz of cicadas, the low murmur of voices. All of it faded. He walked toward her, step by deliberate step. Emma's heart thundered in her chest, but her posture never cracked. She stood her ground as he stopped directly in front of her. His eyes locked onto hers, blue steel pinning her in place. And then he raised his hand. A salute. Deliberate, crisp, directed not downward but upward to her. For a fraction of a second, Emma thought the heat had broken her mind. She wondered if she was hallucinating. A SEAL commander saluting a 21-year-old private. But no, the movement was real, carried out with precision, a recognition she couldn't explain. Her body reacted before her mind could catch up. She snapped into position, returned the salute with flawless sharpness. Gasps whispered down the line of Marines. A petty officer muttered, "Did he just?" before being elbowed silent. The salute lingered. Not a flick, not a courtesy, a deliberate acknowledgement. When he finally lowered his hand, the weight of the moment didn't fade. It settled into the humid air like stone. Emma's chest tightened. Her throat wanted to ask why, but her training locked her tongue. Soldiers didn't question commanders. He gave the faintest nod, barely perceptible, and then he turned, climbed back into the SUV and drove through the gate. The silence shattered like glass. "Holy hell," one Marine whispered. "Never seen that before. 6 years I've stood here. Never, never." Emma didn't move. She kept her eyes forward, her posture unbroken, but inside a storm churned. Why her? She had done nothing heroic, nothing extraordinary. She had only stood her ground, treated him like every other ID. Was that enough to draw a salute? By the end of her shift, the whispers were spreading across the base. In the chow hall, soldiers leaned over trays, voices hushed. "You hear about the gate?" "Yeah," saluted a private first. "No way." "I swear, half the checkpoint saw it." By nightfall, the story was everywhere. In the barracks, her roommate grinned. "Your famous private, the woman who made salute." Emma muttered, unlacing her boots, "I didn't make him do anything." But when she lay awake in her bunk, staring at the ceiling, she replayed it over and over. The sharpness of his hand, the intensity in his eyes. There was meaning in it, she could feel it. But she didn't know what. And deep down, that mystery burned hotter than the recognition. Because somewhere in that salute, she sensed a truth she wasn't ready for. A truth that would pull her out of obscurity and into something much larger than gate duty. Something that would demand more than discipline. Something that would demand all of her. Why had he done it? The question haunted her all night. Emma lay in her bunk, staring up at the ceiling, her roommate steady, breathing a faint rhythm in the dark. Every time she closed her eyes, the image returned. His hand rising, deliberate, sharp. The salute that had shattered routine. The nod that lingered like an unanswered riddle. By morning, the entire base knew. She felt it in the corridors, in the way soldiers glanced at her when they thought she wasn't looking. The way conversations broke off mid-sentence as she walked by. Her name whispered in tones that mixed awe, disbelief, and irritation. Some laughed, some doubted, some swore it had to be exaggerated. Emma hated it. She hadn't asked for this attention. She hadn't earned it through blood or battle. It was just a moment, a mystery. But the base didn't see it that way. When her name was called in the company office later that morning, she braced herself. Staff Sergeant Daniels was waiting inside, arms crossed, jaw set like concrete. "Private," he said flatly. "Sergeant," she stood at attention, heart pounding. His eyes narrowed. "Commander has requested you." Emma blinked, requested me. Daniel's tone carried no softness. Personally, temporary detail. He leaned forward across the desk, voice dropping lower. Don't ask me why. I don't know and I don't care. But when a SEAL commander asks for something, you don't say no. You'll report to Building 12 at 800 tomorrow. Emma's mouth went dry. Building 12. The restricted compound. The nerve center of SEAL operations. A place where privates had no business. Yes, Sergeant, she managed, though her voice carried a tremor she hated. Daniel's gaze sharpened. Don't screw this up. You've been given a rare opportunity. Prove the man right, whatever he sees in you. She saluted. He returned it stiffly, and then she walked out, her legs numb. That night, sleep refused her again. Tors, her roommate, shifted on the bunk across from her. You're quiet, she murmured. Emma hesitated, then whispered, What if I don't belong there? Tors rolled onto her side, the dim glow of the barracks light catching her expression. Emma, belonging isn't about rank. It's about showing up and doing the job better than anyone else. That's what he saw. That's why he saluted. Emma swallowed hard, the words heavy in her chest. She wanted to believe them, but doubt still gnawed like a hidden splinter. When dawn broke, she buttoned her uniform with meticulous care, laced her boots than usual, and marched toward Building 12 with a heart that hammered against her ribs. The building loomed ahead, squat and windowless, its presence radiating secrecy. A master-at-arms scanned her orders with a skeptical brow, clearly unconvinced a private belonged anywhere near the place. But the paper was real. The clearance was signed. You're cleared, he said flatly, handing it back. Follow the hall, wait until you're called. Emma stepped inside. The air was cooler, stiller. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The walls were lined with closed doors stamped with coded numbers and red-letter warnings, restricted, authorized personnel only. Her boots echoed on the tile as she walked deeper, each step carrying her further from the familiar world of the gate. In the waiting room she sat alone, her hands folded tightly in her lap, spine rigid, eyes fixed on the clock, every second dragged like an anchor. At last a door opened. Private, a voice called. She rose instantly, shoulders square. A young lieutenant with sharp eyes gestured silently for her to follow, down the hall, through another door, into a room that seemed to hum with authority. Commander was there. Not in dress blues this time, in fatigues, sleeves rolled, scars faintly visible on his forearms. He stood behind a desk stacked with mission folders, his presence filling the room as effortlessly as it had filled the gate. Private, he said evenly. Emma snapped a salute, sir. He returned it, smaller than the one at the gate, but no less deliberate. Silence hung. His eyes weighed her, as if peeling back layers she didn't know she carried. Finally he spoke, Do you know why you're here? No, sir. He nodded once, approving the honesty. I watched you yesterday. Most privates treat gate duty like punishment. They slouch. They cut corners. You didn't. Emma swallowed. It's my post, sir. I take it seriously. That's why I saluted, he said, the words sharp as gravel. Her chest tightened. To hear it spoken aloud, the reason she had replayed endlessly, hit like a jolt. Respect isn't given by rank, continued. It's earned in the way you carry yourself when no one's watching. You stood like a soldier. You held your ground. That deserves recognition. Emma's throat closed. She wanted to thank him, but the words wouldn't come. But a salute, added, leaning forward, is only a beginning. I want to see if the discipline you showed at a gate carries into harder places. Her eyes widened. You'll assist my staff. Clerical work, scheduling, logs. Don't misunderstand, this isn't busy work. Mistakes here don't mean embarrassment. They mean lives. The weight of his words settled heavy. Emma straightened, voice steady despite her racing pulse. Understood, sir. He studied her for another long moment, then nodded. Report here daily at 700. Dismissed. She saluted. He returned it, and then she left the room, her legs trembling beneath her, her heart roaring in her ears. That night in the barracks she lay awake again, but the storm inside her was different, not just fear, not just doubt, something sharper, a flicker of purpose. For the first time since raising her right hand to enlist, she felt the faint sense that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't invisible anymore. The next morning, she stepped into Building 12 as ordered. Her desk was small, tucked outside the operations wing, files stacked neatly, a computer humming faintly. At first the task seemed ordinary, log entries, schedule updates, memo deliveries. But as the hours unfolded, the stakes became clearer. One wrong number in a briefing schedule, and an entire operation could be delayed. One missed signature, and a deployment could stall. It wasn't paperwork, it was lifeblood. Emma worked with the same precision she had brought to the gate, every stroke of her pen deliberate, every entry double-checked. Rarely addressed her directly. He didn't need to. She felt his presence like a shadow glancing at her desk when he passed, pausing for a heartbeat to scan her work. He never praised, never criticized, only observed. And somehow that was worse. The other staff noticed too. One petty officer leaned over her desk one afternoon, voice low. "Word is, the commander handpicked you. No idea why, don't screw it up." Emma forced a polite nod, but the words cut. She didn't want resentment. She hadn't asked for this assignment, but she would not fail. Late one evening, long after most had gone, Emma caught her first test. A discrepancy in a mission file. One page listed a time as 2300, another as 200. Her pulse spiked. If she ignored it, no one might ever know. But if the wrong time carried forward, it could derail everything. She rose, file in hand, and knocked on his office door. "Enter," his voice commanded. She stepped inside, saluting quickly. "Sir, I found a discrepancy in mission timing. I didn't want to assume which was correct without confirming." Took the file, scanned it, then set it down. His eyes flicked up to hers. "You caught this?" "Yes, sir." Silence stretched, long enough that she thought she'd. Then the faintest curve touched the corner of his mouth. "Good eye." 2 words, barely more than a grunt, but they lit something inside her. "Go get some rest," he said, closing the file. "You'll need it." As she walked back to the barracks, exhaustion weighing on her body, she realized the shift. It wasn't about being praised. It wasn't about the base's whispers. It was about proving, if only for a moment, that she belonged. That her discipline wasn't confined to the gate. That she had a place in the shadows of Building 12. And for the first time, Emma felt something she hadn't since stepping onto the base. Not just duty. Purpose. Why did whispers cut deeper than orders? Emma hadn't expected the salute to follow her here. Yet every step through Building 12, every folder passed from hand to hand, every meeting scheduled with flawless precision, the shadow of that moment at the gate trailed her. She had thought discipline was invisible. A private's duty was to be efficient, silent, replaceable. But now she could feel eyes on her, sharp and questioning. Some eyes carried curiosity, some doubt, some resentment. And Emma couldn't decide which weighed heavier. It began subtly. In the chow hall, voices hushed as she entered. A fork clattered on a tray, heads bent quickly, too quickly. In the corridors, officers paused mid-sentence, their glances sliding to her before they resumed. Her roommate Tors teased her with grins and memes floating through group chats, cartoons of commanders saluting traffic cones labeled private. Emma groaned, but Tors only laughed. "Don't you see," Tors said one night, tossing a sock at her. "You've become a story, and stories travel faster than facts." Emma had no answer. She wanted respect, yes, but not like this, not twisted into a legend she hadn't asked for. And the unease deepened when Sergeant Daniels called her into his office. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, his eyes colder than usual. You've been on detail a week now. No complaints, but listen carefully, you're walking a fine line. Emma stiffened. Sergeant. The commander sees something in you. Don't ask me what, but the rest of the base, they don't like it. They don't like a private being singled out, especially not by him. Emma's stomach tightened. I didn't ask for this, Sergeant. I know, Daniel said. His voice softened for half a breath, then hardened again. But perception is reality. Some will think you're special, some will think you're a fluke, and some will want to see you fail, just to prove a point. The words hit harder than any reprimand. What should I do, Sergeant? Daniel studied her. For a flicker, there was something almost human in his gaze. Do your job, do it better than anyone else. That's the only way through. Emma nodded, though the knot in her chest tightened further. And so she did. Every report checked 3 times, every schedule aligned to the minute, every memo delivered ahead of time. She became invisible in the best way, efficient, reliable, without error. But still the whispers followed. She overheard 2 staffers in the hallway, voices low but cutting clear. Why her? One muttered. Because sees potential, the other said. Or because he's making a point. You salute a private, you send a message. The words stung sharper than she wanted to admit. What if they were right? What if she wasn't chosen for who she was, but for what she represented? That night in the barracks, Emma lay still, staring at the ceiling. She replayed the salute in her mind again and again, the sharpness of his hand, the intensity in his gaze. No, it hadn't been symbolic, it hadn't been a statement, it had been personal. She refused to believe otherwise. The next afternoon, she found herself alone in his office, delivering a folder for his review. He leaned over a map scattered with red markers, his forearms braced on the desk. He looked up when she entered, his eyes sharp, steady. On time, he said simply, taking the folder. Yes, sir. She hesitated at the door, then gathered the courage to speak. Sir, may I ask something? He raised a brow. Go ahead. Her throat tightened, but she forced the words out. Why me? The silence stretched, studied her for a long moment, then set the folder aside. Because discipline is rare, he said at last. Anyone can shine when the stakes are high, but only a few stand tall when no one's watching. You did. Emma's breath caught. Don't waste it, he added, his voice like stone. She nodded, throat too tight to reply. The salute wasn't just a rumor anymore. It wasn't a mystery. It was a catalyst, and Emma could feel it reshaping her path with every step. In the following days, the pressure grew sharper. Staffers who once ignored her now examined her work more closely, their eyes narrowing as they signed off on files she had prepared. She felt the weight in their clipped tones, the way they double-checked her corrections. It wasn't hostility. Not yet, it was skepticism, a colder kind of judgment. So she met it with perfection. Her reports flawless, her logs aligned to the second, her posture unwavering. She didn't argue, she didn't defend herself. She let her work speak. Still, the question lingered in the back of her mind. What if she wasn't chosen for her? What if she was just a symbol? The tension came to a breaking point one late evening when a briefing folder arrived with mismatched details. A flight manifest listed one name, a logistics file listed another. If left uncorrected, someone would be left behind. Emma stared at the pages, her pulse quickening. This wasn't her report. It wasn't her mistake. She could pass it along, wash her hands, and no one would blame her. But something in her chest clenched. She rose, file in hand, and knocked on his door. He looked up from his desk, his gaze as steady as ever. Sir, she said, stepping forward, there's a discrepancy in the manifest. I didn't want to assume which was correct. Scanned the file, then looked at her. You caught this? Yes, sir. His silence stretched long enough that her palms dampened. Then he nodded once. Good. 2 syllables, simple but heavy as iron. That night, Emma walked back to the barracks with her head higher, not because she'd been praised, but because she had proven again that her discipline mattered. And for the first time, she realized something she hadn't dared admit. The salute had been the spark, but the real test had only just begun. Why did the younger ones watch her that way? Emma noticed it first at Chow. A pair of recruits, fresh out of training, lingered too long at the serving line. Their trays clutched awkwardly, their eyes darting toward her table before they turned away. The next day, it was a single private who slowed as he passed her in the corridor, glancing up with something like curiosity in his gaze. At first, Emma ignored it, but soon the pattern became clear. Whispers no longer came only from officers and staff. They came from the youngest soldiers on base, too. They weren't mocking. They weren't skeptical. They were hopeful. And Emma felt the weight of that hope settle on her shoulders. She had never asked to be an example. She still questioned why he had chosen her, why he had saluted at the gate that day. But now others were looking at her differently, as if her posture, her discipline, carried a lesson they hadn't yet learned. One morning, a recruit stopped at her desk in Building 12. He shifted from foot to foot, barely 19, his uniform too crisp, his voice unsteady. Private." Emma looked up, keeping her tone neutral. "Yes." He cleared his throat. "I heard you were the one commander saluted." Emma's face didn't change. "Yes," she said simply. His eyes widened. "Wow, I mean that's," he trailed off, words failing him. She leaned forward slightly. "Respect isn't given by rank," she said quietly. "It's earned by how you carry yourself when no one's looking. That's all it was." The recruit swallowed, nodding slowly, as if her words carried more weight than he'd expected. "I guess I've been slacking at the gate myself," he admitted. "Then start today," Emma said, her tone firm but not unkind. "Discipline is cumulative. It builds over time. Nobody notices the small things until they matter." The young man straightened, nodded again, and left. Emma sat back, realizing with a faint tremor that she had just passed a long lesson, and somehow it felt important. But influence, she was learning, was never clean. For every young recruit who looked at her with admiration, there was a staff officer who looked at her with disdain. She heard the whispers as she passed in the hall. "Why does he keep her around? She's just a private. Commander's experiment, nothing more." Emma forced herself not to flinch, not to break stride. She answered their doubts with action, reports flawless, schedules airtight, memos accurate down to the smallest digit. When errors crossed her desk, she corrected them silently, efficiently. It wasn't recognition she wanted, it was competence, and competence, she knew, could outlast gossip. Still, the resentment lingered. One afternoon, she overheard two lieutenants in the operations wing. "She's getting too much attention. Don't forget who chose her. We follow him, not the rumor mill." Emma kept walking, her jaw tight. She didn't want to be defended. She wanted to be irrelevant, invisible except for the work she did. But invisibility had slipped from her grasp the moment had raised his hand at the gate. The pressure came to a breaking point during a week of chaos. A last-minute personnel change had thrown schedules into disarray. Rooms double-booked, briefings colliding, officers muttering curses under their breath as they scrambled to salvage order. Emma felt the air tighten with tension. She drew in a breath, pulled out her checklist, and began to move. Room allocations reassigned, timelines adjusted, notifications delivered. She smoothed chaos into order with the same precision she had once applied to IDs at the gate. By the time Commander entered, the office was calm, files aligned, officers seated ready, the storm erased. His eyes found hers briefly, a faint nod, no words, but she understood. That night, when she sat at her desk long after most had gone, stepped out of his office. His presence, as always, carried weight. "You're still here," he said. "Yes, sir," Emma replied quickly. "Come in." She followed him into his office. Sparse, commanding. Maps on the walls, mission folders stacked on the table. He leaned against the desk, arms folded, eyes fixed on her. "Do you know why I saluted you that day?" he asked at last. Emma's breath caught. It was the question that had haunted her for weeks, the one whispered in the barracks, the one she had asked herself in the dark, over and over. "No, sir," she admitted softly. "I've wondered." His gaze sharpened. "Most people think respect comes from rank. They're wrong. Rank is just an assignment. Respect is earned in the moments when no one's looking." Emma sat very still, heart pounding. "You stood at that gate," continued, "with more discipline than I've seen from men twice your age and rank. You weren't performing. You weren't trying to impress. You just did the job with precision like it mattered, because it does matter." He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. "That's why I saluted you. Not because of who you are on paper, but because of how you carried yourself when you thought no one noticed." Emma swallowed hard, her throat tight. "Thank you, sir," she whispered, the words feeling too small for what he had given her. His eyes didn't soften. "Do you know how many times I've seen good men die because of careless mistakes? A digit swapped in a coordinate, a name misspelled on a manifest, a supply dropped to the wrong valley, tiny things, things most people shrug at. And then suddenly you've got a team stranded, waiting for help that never comes." His voice was calm, but Emma could feel the fury under it, a fury sharpened by years of battle. "Discipline," he said, stepping closer, "isn't about shining boots or standing tall at inspection. Discipline is about knowing that every detail, every second could mean life or death for someone else." Emma's chest ached with the weight of it. She thought of the files she had corrected, the errors she had flagged. For the first time, she understood the true stakes behind those small victories. "Sir," she asked carefully, "why tell me this?" His gaze steadied her. "Because you already understand it, even if you don't realize it yet. You proved it at that gate. You've proven it every day since. My job is to sharpen that instinct in you, not smother it." The words landed in her chest like anchors. For so long she had wondered if she was just a symbol, a token of point to the others, but now she saw it differently. He wasn't using her. He was testing her, and in his own way teaching her. "Do you regret it?" she asked before she could stop herself. "Saluting me, I mean." For the first time, his mouth curved into something faintly resembling a smile. "No, but you should know it made things harder for you. People will doubt you, resent you. Some will even root for you to fail. You'll have to be twice as sharp to silence them." Emma straightened, her voice firm. "Then I'll be twice as sharp." Smile deepened just slightly enough to reach his eyes. "Good." When she walked back to the barracks that night, the whispers still trailed her, but they didn't cut as deep. Because now she understood. The salute wasn't just a moment, it was a responsibility. And Emma would carry it. Not for recognition, not for pride, but for the lives that discipline protected. Why did silence feel heavier than noise? Emma felt it pressing in as she walked the halls of Building 12, folders balanced against her chest. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a steady rhythm that only seemed to amplify the quiet glances that followed her. Officers who had once walked past her without notice now measured her with clipped expressions. Staffers double-checked her reports as if searching for cracks. And beneath it all, the whispers never stopped. "She's just a private. This project won't last long." Emma heard them always, but she didn't answer. She couldn't. Words would only fuel the fire, so she let her work speak for her, every report perfect, every detail aligned, every correction made without hesitation. But influence has a way of seeping into places even doubt cannot reach. The younger privates began to linger near her desk. They asked questions they didn't need to ask about logistics, about procedures, about how she managed to keep her bearing under scrutiny. At first, Emma deflected, But soon she realized they weren't seeking information. They were seeking example. One morning, a private named Daniels, barely 19, with a nervous twitch in his hands, stood by her desk. "Private," he said, voice low, "I wanted to ask, how do you stay like that?" "Like what?" Emma asked, not looking up from the schedule she was aligning. "Calm, focused, respected, people talk about you." Emma set her pen down, finally meeting his eyes. She kept her tone steady, even. "Discipline isn't a show. It's quiet, steady. You do the job correctly even when no one's watching. You carry it into every task, no matter how small. That's how respect is earned." Daniel swallowed, nodding as if the words carried weight he hadn't expected. "I think I get it." "Then start now," Emma said softly. He straightened, jaw tightening with new determination. And as he walked away, Emma felt something shift. She wasn't just surviving scrutiny. She was shaping others, quietly, subtly, but undeniably. Still, resentment ran just as deep. Some officers muttered louder now, their disdain no longer hidden. One lieutenant scoffed openly in the hallway, his voice sharp enough for her to hear. "She's just the gate girl. It's wasting his time." Emma didn't flinch. She walked past, chin high, posture unbroken, but inside the sting lingered. That night in the barracks, Tors noticed the tightness in her shoulders. "They're still at it?" she asked, leaning against the bunk frame. Emma unlaced her boots slowly. "Yes." Tors studied her a moment, then smirked faintly. "Then let them. Their words don't carry weight. Yours do. You think cares what they say." Emma shook her head. "It's not him I'm worried about, it's everyone else." Tors leaned closer. "Then prove them wrong, not with words, with silence, with action. That's what you do best, isn't it?" Emma gave a faint, tired smile. Tors wasn't wrong. The real test came days later. A logistics memo crossed her desk detailing supply drops for a SEAL unit operating overseas. The coordinates printed in bold. At a glance, everything seemed aligned. But something tugged at her gut. A number didn't look right. She pulled up the grid, cross-referencing. Her pulse spiked. The coordinates on the memo would drop supplies miles off target. A simple digit, a minor misprint. But if uncorrected, it would leave a team stranded without what they needed. Emma stared at the page, heart hammering. This wasn't her file. It wasn't her mistake. She could pass it along and no one would know. But she couldn't. She rose, memo in hand, and walked to his office. "Enter," came his voice. Emma stepped inside, saluted sharply. "Sir, I found a discrepancy in the logistics memo. The coordinates don't align, if left unchecked." Took the paper, scanning quickly. His jaw tightened. He looked up at her, his gaze sharp. "You caught this?" "Yes, sir." For a long moment, silence hung between them. Then he nodded once. "Good. Most would have passed it along without question." Emma exhaled slowly, relief washing through her. His voice dropped lower, edged with steel. "Do you know why details matter, Private?" Emma answered carefully. "Because small mistakes lead to bigger ones, sir." Shook his head. "Because lives ride on them. A miswritten coordinate isn't just ink. It's a helicopter landing in the wrong valley. It's a team waiting in the dark and finding nothing. Discipline in detail is discipline in battle. Never forget that." Emma's throat tightened. "Yes, sir." He studied her a moment longer, then returned the file. "Good work. Now go get some rest." She saluted, turned, and left, her chest heavy but lit with something stronger than pride. Purpose. The next day she noticed Daniels again, standing taller now, his posture, his tone firmer. Others followed, subtly mimicking her bearing, her attention to detail. And Emma realized something profound. Leadership wasn't about rank. It wasn't about medals or titles. It was influence, the quiet shaping of those around you. She hadn't asked for it, but it had found her. Still, resentment hadn't vanished. That evening, she overheard staff officers again. "She's getting too much attention. She's not even qualified to be here." Don't forget Commander chose her. We follow him, not our opinions." Emma kept walking. She didn't look back. But her resolve hardened. If they wanted her to prove herself, she would. Not with speeches, not with defense, but with silence, with precision, with unyielding discipline. Late that night, Tors found her still awake, polishing her boots under the dim light. Again, Tors asked, half amused, "You're obsessed?" Emma looked up, brush in hand. "Not obsessed, disciplined." Tors chuckled, climbing into her bunk. "Same thing." Emma only smiled faintly, hearing words echo in her mind. Discipline isn't about the shine, it's about the life it protects. And for the first time since the salute at the gate, she no longer felt like an imposter. She felt like a soldier with a purpose. Why did it always feel like the walls were listening? The hum of fluorescent lights filled the narrow hallway as Emma walked quickly, a stack of folders pressed tight against her chest. Each page was stamped with the same warnings: confidential, restricted, eyes only. Red letters that might as well have been blood. She didn't need reminding that what she carried wasn't paper. It was lives. Building 12 was alive with its usual rhythm: boots on tile, clipped orders exchanged in low voices, the rustle of uniforms brushing past. But today the air felt tense. Emma had been at this post nearly a month, and still every day sharpened the pressure. This wasn't gate duty. This wasn't IDs and monotony. This was the pulse of SEAL operations, where a single oversight could ripple across oceans. She had learned the stakes. She had lived the tests. But she hadn't yet faced the moment where failure would mean more than whispers. That moment was coming. It began in the operations wing, a buzz running low and urgent across the staff. A critical briefing loomed. New deployments, tight schedules, high stakes. Emma had been tasked with assembling the briefing folders, names, times, locations, all aligned into a symphony of precision. She double-checked every entry, every timestamp, every signature. Her pen moved like a blade across paper. She knew the whispers outside the walls still lingered. She knew eyes waited for her to falter. Not today. But chaos doesn't ask for permission. Hours before the briefing, word arrived of a last-minute personnel shift. A commander reassigned. Another officer stepping in. The chain of orders rippled instantly, schedules collapsing like dominoes. Emma felt the tension crash across the office. Staffers muttered curses, phones rang, radios crackled. Meetings overlapped, rooms double-booked, names shuffled in confusion. Her pulse hammered, but she didn't freeze. She pulled out her checklist, anchored herself in routine, and began to move. One room reallocated. One meeting shifted. Notifications hand-delivered. She wove chaos back into order with the same quiet precision she had once used at the gate. By the time Commander entered, the storm had been smoothed over, officers seated, files aligned, the hum of readiness restored. His eyes swept the room, then paused briefly on her. A nod, barely perceptible. But she felt it like a hand on her shoulder. Yet the storm hadn't passed. Later that night, when most of the building had emptied, Emma remained at her desk, combing through the day's debris. She spotted it then, a file with a timestamp error, the wrong date on a critical report. Her breath caught. If it carried forward, it would disrupt the next deployment sequence. Her fingers tightened on the folder. She could correct it quietly, slip it back, and no one would know. But something in her chest whispered louder. Lives ride on them. She rose, file in hand, and knocked on the door. "Enter." The commander looked up, fatigue shadowing his face. "Sir," Emma said, voice steady, "this report carries yesterday's timestamp. I flagged it." Took the file, scanned quickly, then set it down. His eyes lifted to hers. "You caught this?" "Yes, sir." His silence stretched until her stomach twisted. Then he gave the faintest nod. "Good. Most would past it along without a thought." Emma exhaled slowly, relief, purpose, a spark of belonging. But's gaze held her there. Do you know why these small things matter? Emma straightened. Because small mistakes lead to bigger ones, sir. He shook his head slightly. Because a small mistake can bury a team. A misprinted time, a wrong digit, it's not paperwork. It's boots landing in the wrong valley. It's men waiting for supplies that never come. Discipline in detail is discipline in battle. Remember that. Yes, sir. Good, he leaned back, his voice quieter now. Go get some rest, you'll need it. She saluted, turned, and left, the weight of his words pressing down harder than any reprimand could. That night, lying in her bunk, she replayed it all. The chaos, the correction, the lesson. She wasn't just surviving Building 12, she was being sharpened by it. But still, the whispers followed. The next day in the corridor, she caught fragments of voices. She's just a private. Why does he trust her? Because she listens, another muttered. Emma walked on, chin high, but the sting burned. Later in the chow hall, Tors sat across from her, chewing slowly as she studied Emma's expression. They're still at it? Tors asked. Yes, Emma said, pushing food around her tray. Tors smirked faintly. Then let them. You've already proven them wrong. You think didn't notice yesterday. You think he nods at anyone. Emma looked down, the memory of his nod flickering like a quiet fire in her chest. But the test wasn't over. That evening, another folder landed on her desk, a personnel manifest with 2 names reversed. At first glance, trivial, a clerical error, but the implications hit her instantly. The wrong person listed at the wrong time, a team leader replaced by someone unprepared. Her pulse spiked. Again, she could ignore it. No one would know, but she did what she always did. She rose, carried it to his office, and knocked. He looked up, expression unreadable. Sir, a discrepancy in the manifest. 2 names reversed. I didn't assume. He scanned it quickly, then leaned back, his eyes locking onto hers. You caught this too? Yes, sir. This time silence stretched longer, his gaze sharper. Then finally, good, you're learning. Emma's chest tightened, not from fear, from something sharper, recognition. When she returned to her desk, the whispers didn't matter as much. Not the officer's disdain, not the skepticism. Because she had learned something deeper than approval. She had learned the truth behind salute. It hadn't been reward, it had been responsibility. And she would carry it. Not for pride, not for recognition. For the lives her discipline might one day protect. Why did resentment grow loudest when respect grew quiet? Emma felt it boiling under the surface. The longer she served in Building 12, the more her influence seemed to ripple. Recruits straightened when she passed. Younger privates mimicked her posture at the gate. Even small corrections she made spread as quiet lessons, attention to detail, consistency, discipline. But every ripple drew eyes, and not all of them were kind. It began with mutters in corridors, then clipped tones in briefings. Soon, the skepticism hardened into something sharper. Officers stopped disguising their questions. Staffers let disdain edge their voices. She's still just a private. This isn't a classroom, it's operations. She's only here because of him. Emma kept silent. She let her work answer, reports precise, schedules flawless, every correction deliberate. But silence didn't silence them. The storm broke one afternoon in the operations wing. Emma was delivering briefing folders when she caught 2 lieutenants in a hushed but heated exchange. You're telling me he trusts her with this? One hissed. He trusts her more than half the staff, the other replied. She hasn't earned it. She earned it at the gate. Emma froze, folder clutched in her hands. The words cut sharp, bitter. She moved on quickly, not letting them see the flicker in her eyes, but inside doubt gnawed. What if they were right? That evening, she sat at her desk long after most had gone. The hum of computers filled the quiet, her pen scratching across a log. She didn't hear approach until his shadow stretched across her papers. "You hear them," he said simply. Emma straightened, fighting the instinct to deny it. "Yes, sir." "Good," replied. His voice was calm but edged with steel. "If you can survive that, you can survive anything. Leadership isn't about rank, it isn't about medals, it's about influence. And influence draws fire." Emma swallowed. "I didn't ask for influence, sir." "No one ever does," said. His gaze pinned her. "But you have it. The question is, what will you do with it?" The words lingered long after he left. She wrestled with them through the night, lying in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Tors shifted nearby, watching her. "You're thinking too loud," Tors muttered. Emma exhaled slowly. "They hate me." "They don't hate you," Tors said, sitting up. "They hate what you remind them of. That rank isn't everything. That one private with discipline can unsettle an entire chain of command." Emma turned her head. "And what if I fail? What if I prove them right?" Tors leaned back on her elbows, smirking faintly. "Then you'll fail standing tall, which is more than most ever manage." Emma didn't smile, but the words settled deep. The test came sooner than she expected. A critical operation was, its preparations running through Building 12 like electricity. Files moved faster. Radios buzzed nonstop. The air sharp with urgency. Emma's role was simple on paper: logging schedules, delivering folders, aligning details. But every detail mattered. Every folder carried weight. Midway through the chaos, a senior petty officer confronted her at her desk. "Private," he snapped, slamming a file down. "Why was this report on your desk and not in the commander's hands?" Emma looked up startled. "Sir, I was reviewing." "You don't review, you deliver." His voice rose, sharp enough to turn heads. "This isn't your job, you're not staff, you're a private. Stop pretending otherwise." Silence stretched across the room. Eyes flicked between them. Emma stood slowly, spine straight. Her voice steady, though her chest burned. "Sir, I flagged a discrepancy in that report. A wrong digit in the coordinates. If it had moved forward, it would have redirected the supply drop." The petty officer blinked. His mouth opened, then closed. The silence grew heavier. From across the room, Commander's voice cut like a blade. "Petty officer." The man stiffened, spinning. "Sir." "Private did her job," said, his tone low but unyielding. "And because she did, men will receive their supplies where they need them. Do you have a problem with that?" The petty officer's throat worked. "No, sir." "Good," said, "then carry on." The man snapped a salute, retreating quickly. Emma stood frozen, heat rushing to her face. Dozens of eyes were still on her, some skeptical, some curious, but a few held something else: respect. Didn't linger. He simply met her gaze briefly, the faintest flicker of approval in his eyes, before turning away. That night Tors found Emma sitting on her bunk, staring at the floor. "You okay?" Tors asked. Emma nodded faintly. "I don't want him to keep defending me. I want to stand on my own." Tors tilted her head. "He isn't defending you. He's showing them why you're here. The rest is up to you." Emma lay back, closing her eyes, the weight of it pressing deep. Was right. Leadership wasn't about rank. It was about influence. And influence was heavier than she had ever imagined. The next morning at chow, she saw it again. A young recruit paused at her table, tray in hand, his voice hesitant. "Private," he said quietly. "Thank you for yesterday. I think I understand now. Discipline matters." Emma looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "Start now, not for me, not for him, for yourself." The recruit nodded firmly, eyes alight with determination. And Emma realized something she hadn't before. The salute at the gate had made her visible, but it was her silence, her precision, her discipline that made her matter. And she would carry that, no matter the weight. Why did the quiet moments feel heavier than the loud ones? Emma stood outside Building 12 as dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in pale gold. The air was cool, the bass just stirring awake. Trucks rumbled faintly in the distance. The flag on the pole snapped in the breeze. She adjusted the strap on her rifle, boots planted firmly, posture steady. She wasn't at the gate anymore, but the stance had never left her. Discipline was no longer a duty. It had become who she was. Behind her, the building buzzed with preparation. A major briefing loomed, one that would gather commanders, officers, and staff across the installation. Emma had been told to prepare folders, align schedules, ensure the room carried no flaws. She had done it all as she always did, every page perfect, every seat arranged, every clock aligned. But today carried weight beyond schedules. She could feel it in her chest, the heaviness of expectation pressing down. She thought of the whispers she had survived, the resentment, the skepticism. She thought of the younger recruits who now stood taller, their bearing sharper because of what they had seen in her. And she thought of words. Respect isn't rank, it's discipline when no one's watching. The briefing began. Emma moved quietly through the room, placing folders, delivering final notes. Officers in crisp uniforms filled the seats. Staffers whispered hurriedly. The air thickened with anticipation. Then Commander entered. The room shifted instantly, back straightening, voices cutting off, silence falling. He carried weight without needing to demand it. Emma stepped to the side unseen as he moved to the front. The briefing began. Details of operations laid out, maps illuminated, schedules spoken aloud. Emma followed along silently, eyes moving to the pages she had prepared, every number aligned, every marker correct. Then midway through, it happened. An officer presented a file, one Emma had not prepared. She caught the error instantly. A wrong date, a wrong sequence. The implications rippled in her mind with terrifying clarity. If left uncorrected, men would move at the wrong time. An operation would fail before it began. Her pulse pounded, her throat tightened. She wasn't supposed to speak. She wasn't supposed to interrupt. She was just a private. But discipline wasn't silence, it was action. Emma stepped forward, her voice steady but quiet. "Sir, permission to speak." Dozens of eyes turned to her. The air thickened, brittle with tension. His gaze cut to her, sharp, unreadable. "Speak." Emma held the file aloft. "The timestamp is incorrect. It reads yesterday. The schedule conflicts with the manifest. If left uncorrected, the team will deploy without support." The room stilled. Took the file, scanning quickly. His jaw tightened. His eyes lifted to the officer, who flushed with embarrassment. "This is correct?" asked Emma. "Yes, sir." Her voice did not shake. He nodded once, then spoke to the room. "Correction noted. Adjust the plan. Move forward with the proper sequence." The briefing resumed, but the silence around Emma lingered. She could feel eyes on her, heavy and sharp, some surprised, some skeptical, but a few filled with something different. Respect. When the meeting ended, officers filed out, murmuring low. Emma moved to gather leftover folders, her hands steady though her chest still pounded. She turned to leave and froze. Commander stood at the front, his eyes on her. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand. A salute. Not in private, not in passing, but here in front of them all. The room stilled again. The weight of the gesture hung heavy, undeniable. Emma's throat tightened. Her chest burned. She snapped to attention, returning the salute with flawless precision. For a long moment the two of them held it, commander and private, respect flowing both ways, unspoken but unshakable. Then lowered his hand. His voice was calm, steady. "Discipline protects lives, remember that." Emma nodded once. "Yes, sir." She turned, walking out of the room, her boots striking the tile in rhythm with her heart. Outside, the sun had risen higher, casting long shadows across the base. The air smelled faintly of dust and oil. The flag snapped harder in the breeze. Emma paused, looking up at it. She thought of the gate where it had all begun. She thought of the whispers, the resentment, the quiet weight she had carried. She thought of the salute that had changed everything. And for the first time, she understood fully. Dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't argue. It doesn't demand. It acts. And sometimes that is enough.